Thank you, Katie. Tim Walpole. I'm head of innovation for BJSS. Been with the company about 4 years. Started with about 400, ended up being head of mobile. We're now 1,400 people, so you can see how we've grown. I've been doing IT consultancy for about 30 years. But it's always been about how to deliver value. So that's what I've always been interested in. I've always been interested in, if someone gives me a challenge saying, how do you connect this to this, or how do you make this work with that bit? It's always been, you throw that challenge over and it's, yeah, I'll do that, and then I'll hand it over to someone else to deliver. It's that kind of innovation piece, that proving something that works. Whether it's AI in today's world, but it's probably not AI, it's probably something we did 20 years ago with, I don't know, document management and workflow, which they now called RPA and IPA and things. It's just name changes of what we've been doing for years. So I'm going to talk a bit about voice-assisted living. I think there's a great case to be able to help dementia sufferers, Alzheimer's sufferers, with some of the technology of today. And I'm going to show some things about that. So before we go into it in depth, so for those that don't know anything about conversational AI, and I'm sure you all do, virtual assistants are either text-based or chat-based. I've just lost my microphone for some reason, which talk with a conversational AI. The conversational AI bit is the brain or the soul of a chatbot. And chatbots should have souls, they should have brain, they should have personality, they should have a tone of voice. They're not just this dumb thing at an end which says something and then when you ask it a question it says, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. It's got to have that living feeling about it. Now if you think I'm going to be working with dementia patients, Alzheimer's patients, that tone of voice is potentially different for every single patient, every single Alzheimer's sufferers, and it needs to be right for them. So, let's have a quick hands up, shall we? Who's got a voice assistant at home? That's not bad. Who's got 2 voice assistants at home? Yeah. There's a man over there. Hold it. Right, who's this person that's got 3 voice assistants at home? Oh, it's only me. Who hasn't got one of these? Who's got something different? What have you got? Okay, so these are probably the most popular ones, certainly today. Google Assistant, which 1 billion devices. They have gone over 1 billion, I think it was in January this year. If you think about that, it's on all our phones and things like that. 30 languages, 13 dialects, and 115 languages in development. That's a massive, massive number. You can see where they are going, what we are trying to do. Amazon Alexa, so I got an Alexa first. I got it on day 1, and I thought this is really cool. The day I got an Apple Siri, well, I got that because I wanted to use music and things like that, and it is really cool at music. It's absolutely rubbish at doing anything else. The day I got Google Assistant, Alexa went in the bin. I've just sent it off to my dad actually yesterday because I don't need her any longer. One of the reasons that the Google is better, and it's why actually Alexa is good as well, is the screen. We as humans talk, but we also use our eyes. So when I say something like, hey Alexa, oh no, not yet. Hey Google, tell me what the weather is. I don't want to have to wait for sort of, oh my God, what's the weather tomorrow? Tomorrow it's going to be 13 degrees in the afternoon. It's going to be, I can just look over at the screen and get that information. So being able to take the information that's verbal, yes, sometimes I do want it verbally, depends where I am, but potentially I want to be able to say, can I actually have it on that screen as well? Vision for the future, maybe it's not a screen like that. Maybe I'm standing in front of my cooker and I say, hey Google, give me a pasta with whatever recipe, and up comes the recipe in front of me that I can then do some stuff with. I mean, it's not hard tech, we can probably do it today, but that's potentially, or it's in your Google glasses or whatever it is. But that's, you can see where the type of thing that's going. So you've got your voice interaction with your screen. Okay, that's where I got backwards. So where are we on the progress chart? So this is about value, and this is about effort required along the bottom. Most of our bots that we deal with today are FAQ bots, and they're somewhere down here. They don't take a lot of effort to put together, and they don't add much value. They are useful in some places, yes, but we really need to think about, why do I want to put an FAQ bot out? What's the value to the organisation? Because you can probably find that information elsewhere. Now, I am putting some FAQ bots out, but they're a bit further up, which asks you a few questions, so I get some more information from you to say, look, here's the answer to the question you asked. So I'm doing work with a big financial organisation. One of them is time and expenses. And the biggest question they've got is, can I travel business class? And the answers should be, no, of course you can't, but it's yes, if it's over 5 hours and whatever it is. So it asks you that relevant questions. The next thing is it should be able to actually look up some of that. Well, where are you travelling from and to? And I can look up the distances and the time, etc., and tell you when you can travel business. To them, that's a massive value. They can release that person to actually, or two people, to go and do other work for the business, rather than just saying, can I travel business class? But more importantly, and the bit we're certainly starting to play with now, is the personalised conversations. Because personalised conversations allow you to do real stuff, so that it's what I want. It's loyalty and retention. If you can do personalised bots that are good, people will come back to your platform to use it. So that loyalty and retention is really important. If I can then turn that into a conversational bot, so an example might be, I'd like to go on holiday, please. Well, where do you want to go? It's expecting you to say London or Paris or whatever, and you go say, well, where's hot at this time of year? And then it goes, well, Seychelles is really good at this time. And then you go, well, how much is in my bank account? Because it's quite expensive to go off to the Seychelles. And you get this information. And then it wanders back down the track and just says, just to let you know, we were booking a holiday. Where do you want to go? So being able to add that conversational, personalised experience is really important, to go from this boring stuff to actually something that's useful. In order to do that, we've now talked about multiple domains of conversation. So the problem about taking lots of that information, holiday information, information about your bank account, information about, well, it might be flights or weather or whatever, if I put that in one bot, it'd get very confused. Domain pollution and intent pollution really makes that bot not work. So what you need to do is have multiple bots. In order to do that, you have to have a router over the top that understands those conversations. And what we do is we take the domain knowledge from each of those bots. We also take our small talk. So this is the bot that bit says, hi, what's your name, I love you, and all those things. We pass that through machine learning algorithms to categorize all those bots and put that as a bot router. You can now do a conversational question against the bot router. It hands you down to the appropriate bot. You talk to that bot. You potentially have some context. It learns some information about you. And as you move around to the other bots, it passes all that information between you. So this is potentially where we're going with some of the conversational bots. Takes more effort, but it gives you the value. Right, so let's look at bots for our children. 25% of parents subcontract their bedtime stories to technology. Anyone here might do that, or family does that? There probably is. They're probably not holding their hands up. It happens all over the time. 1.5 million kids under 11 use a smart speaker at least once a month. It's going to grow to 2.2 million by 2020. The interesting one here, by 2020, children will expect personal virtual assistants to read them bedtime stories and answer questions. There's no ifs or buts. They are going to be so used to today hearing mummy or daddy or whoever say, just turn on the lights or turn the TV on or do whatever it is. They are going to be growing up with that. For those children that have grown up with iPads, they go like this with the iPad. They also go up to great big televisions and try to do this as well. It is going to be bred into them because that is what they are used to. They're going to be using that before they can use an iPad. Take that to the other extreme. What about the elderly? So one of the interesting things is that the emotional memories in the elderly stay intact within the brain. and they can be triggered as that brain ages. So your brain may forget things, particularly dementia and Alzheimer's patients, but if we can trigger some of that information that we have stored by memories, now that memory might be music, it might be pictures, it might be sounds, it might be the picture of the sports match or watching the television or something. If we can trigger that, then we can potentially help these people to be able to live a better life. In order to do that, we need to store some of that information now. So start storing that information such that in 30 years' time or 40 years' time, when you get dementia, we'll be able to trigger those memories for you. 6 people in the UK over 65 suffer a fall every minute. Voice recognition in this case can be a lifesaver. If you're on the floor, being able to say, look, help, I need someone, rather than lying there until the neighbour comes in or something. Loneliness is a major contributor to Alzheimer's and dementia, which can increase the risk of premature death by 25%. I mean, the numbers are, extraordinary. Voice assistants, and this is different from text. Voice assistants can help them keep their mind sharp. So if you can keep their mind sharp, they don't get dementia, they're not going to die earlier, it's all a good thing. It has to be a good thing. Typing does not do the same. It actually has to be that voice interaction, because that voice actually gets stored in different ways in the brain and things. So some quite sort of really interesting statistics that potentially we can do some stuff about. Let's look at some population trends. These are quite scary. Population age of 65 and over is growing faster than any other age group. By 2050, 1 in 6 will be over age of 65, up from 1 in 11 in 2019. And the scary number, for the first time in history, people age 65 outnumber children under 5. It is a growing population that's growing older, which means the number of people aged 80 years or over by 2050 is going to have tripled from today. And we're not going to have the young people to look after us, so it has to be robots and whatever it is, but it's not going to be the carers of today, because we have not got the people to do that. So some of the stuff that's going on, a couple of things, and then we'll talk about some Alexa skills and things. So meet Eva, world's first powered care assistant in one of the hospitals in America. It's basically used to control the in-house entertainment, to connect to the outside world, to do weather and things. So you've gone in for an operation, you can't get out of bed, this thing is useful. It allows you to do some other things other than just lying on your back doing nothing. Or potentially calling a nurse to say, actually, can you change the channel, please, because I left the controller over there, or whatever it is. It allows the nurses to get on and do other stuff. It may alleviate loneliness. So if it is a good conversational platform and actually it is a useful skill, then rather than sitting there doing nothing and just watching the television, you might be able to have an interaction with that outside world. Not convinced yet, because I'm not sure how powerful it is. It is quite limited to what it does. Meet Ludvig. I'm not sure if me as an Alzheimer's patient or someone with depression would want to talk to this thing. And why it looks like that, I have no idea. But Ludvig can listen to your conversation. He can ask you questions, and in 45 seconds can tell potentially whether you have got Alzheimer's. Don't know how far down the journey you need to be. It does it by understanding how you speak, how much space you put between all your words, whether you turn things like names into he's and she's. So there is an algorithm. I would hope they release that algorithm such that anyone can put that on their website, but I think they're going to commercialize this thing, and I don't think that's right. This should be there for the general public. Yes, okay, you need to make whatever its cost, you need to be able to cover, but I'm not sure it should be commercial. It's a big challenge. So in BGSS, I've been working in conversational AI for about 3 years. We've put together a reference architecture and an accelerator which we use for our clients to take them on the journey from saying, look, I want to do something with conversational AI, to actually deliver some stuff. It is 100% vendor agnostic. It's based on
You can either deploy in Kubernetes and Docker, cloud native. It'll run on AWS, it'll run on Azure, it'll run on Google, it'll run on Ali Cloud. Doesn't really matter where you want. It's multilingual. It has got a conversational CMS to the front of it. It is omnichannel, including voice, so whether it's Alexa's or Google's or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's got a conversational flow builder, so that value chart, it has all those bits. It goes right up to the top level where you can do bots of bots and personalized conversation design. Rapidly build, iterate, and test. So standard DevOps pipeline to deliver conversational bots into the enterprise. We built this because there is not an enterprise delivery of conversational platforms. Yes, you can go and play with stuff. Yes, you can do some stuff. But to deliver stuff in an enterprise that you would be able to say, look, I need to test it properly. I need to assure it. I need to have a proper pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. We have a bot health module, which understands and tells you when your bot is not working properly, if you've got intent pollution, if you've got domain pollution, and it's got sentiment analysis built in. Sentiment analysis, everyone says, yeah, that's great, isn't it? Maybe if you take sentiment over time, so potentially I've got a conversational platform that says I go from here to here to here, and then if I look at the sentiment of all my users down here, I might understand where something's gone wrong. But for a single question, sentiment is usually negative. You know, it's about right. Yes, you get the occasional thing saying I'm angry or something like that, but you need to look at it in general. We're then working with AWS to work for a conversational personal assistant for use in hair combs. What I'm trying to get to is a lockdown Alexa with one skill, and that skill is this one skill. So if I was to say, who's John, it talks to me about who John is. It also should be able to have screen and voice journeys. It should have emergency calling. It should be able to talk to you, initiate conversations to you. It should store and replay memories. It's really, really important, as we've discussed. And it should have a social responsibility module. If I say I'm going to jump under a bus, someone needs to know about that. Every conversational platform that gets put out must have a social responsibility module of some kind. Otherwise, when someone does jump under a bus and you say, well, why did they do that? We didn't do anything about it. So now you should never do live demonstrations on stage with voice, animals, or children. But anyway, hey Alexa, open retirement home.
Today it's a year since you visited those amazing gardens in London. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling sad.
Sorry you're feeling sad. Why is that?
It's raining outside.
Thanks for sharing that with me. Hopefully we can help you feel happier tomorrow.
I've fallen over.
Is this an emergency?
Yes.
Your emergency contact called Tim has been contacted. Do you want to let Tim know what the emergency is?
Yes.
What information do you want to send to Tim?
I've fallen over.
I have sent the information to Tim. Someone will be with you soon.
Goodbye.
Goodbye for now.
Simplistic example. What I would have shown you if I hadn't left my phone on the platform in Banbury today was that actually I got a phone call and that had the information saying, look, someone's fallen over. It's an integrated. If I'd have started that journey, so where it came, how are you feeling today? It's asking for me to say how I'm feeling. If I'd have said, I've fallen over at that point, it would have jumped out, it would have done that other conversation, it would have realised that's more important and done that stuff. But then it would have then probably come back and said, how are you feeling today? But you can see the vision of the type of thing you can build and how important that screen is. I was in AWS Alzheimer's hack the other day, and we put together things like that, saying, let me store some memories, let you show you your grandchildren. Do you remember them? Would you like to store some memories again? So some kind of interesting things. I'm going to bring up 2 slides which I want to sort of pose as questions to you. So what about privacy? Google stated that contractors listen to about 0.2% of all the recordings. That's an interesting way of written that, but never mind. Apple contractors regularly hear confidential medical information, drug deals, and recordings of couples having sex. How do dementia sufferers grant permission to their data? It's a really, really interesting one. But the kind of vision here is we radically need to think how we think of privacy with conversational platforms. At the moment, everyone just says, look, it's fine, but it's not fine. We shouldn't be sending out all this data. I should be able to use some of that data and keep it safe. I shouldn't necessarily, that's being used for machine learning modules. Do I really want that, or do I want to keep it safe? I've actually managed to get our whole conversational platform running on a Raspberry Pi. So Raspberry Pi 4, running conversational NLP engine, running all those services. My next thing is I'm going to hack one of these to actually say, hack Google or Alexa talking to my Raspberry Pi in my house, and then I'm doing complete 100% conversation, as you've just heard it, inside my house without leaving the house. I could sell that to whoever it is, saying, you want a privacy-first solution that you can control for your patient? Really, really important. What about the social impact of AI? Are Alexa, Google, and Siri teaching our children to be rude? When does Alexa or Siri or whatever ever say, well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer that unless you say please? But we're rude to them. We turn around and say, Alexa, just turn the lights on. Our children are learning from that. And maybe it doesn't affect this generation, but next generation or the one after that is going to be a very different generation because we have taught them to be rude. Would you be happy with a relative developing an emotional reliance or attachment to a virtual assistant? You might have to, because if we haven't got the people to look after them, that's what's going to happen. There's a good film about it, which I haven't, called She, I think, which I haven't. Yeah. Question. I'm not going to answer any of these. It's, should parents use technology in the place of human interaction? Are virtual assistants the ethical way to solve loneliness? Whatever my vision, whatever we are doing with AI, conversational platforms, we need to think about what the ethics of this are to make sure that it's right, not only for us, but for the generations that we're doing this down. And I'm going to hand over to Katie, because she's got some more stuff on ethical AI.
So it's quite a lot on one slide. But Tim set that up really brilliantly, because ethical AI is constantly talked about. I'm sure everyone's heard about the trolley problem. I'm personally sick of it, because everyone's talking about it. Everyone's talking about ethics and going, here's some values, and then that's it. It's just silence. And when you start questioning people what that means, they don't know how to answer. So this is groundbreaking stuff. It's groundbreaking technologies. But it's time that we go beyond just values and think about how we can apply this to the solutions that we're building and really think about the wider impact. So we've developed our own ethical AI framework, but we don't just have values. We do have some values, because I think it's important to highlight some key considerations. But we think about all of these values at every single step in the journey, from defining what the use case is for ethical AI, all the way through to scaling it across an organization, scaling it to consumers. So I just want to touch really briefly on them. Human-centered, as I said at the beginning, if we don't involve the end users at the heart of these solutions, then people aren't going to want to use them. We're not going to be solving problems. So this is our way of moving away from AI for the sake of AI. Trust. The biggest problem we've got in the AI market at the moment is that people do not trust the technology. We saw what happened with King's Cross using facial recognition. There was a public outcry, and actually I was really heartened to see that that company decided not to use it anymore, because it shows that they're becoming aware that they need to gain the public's trust, and there needs to be a value exchange that the general public are aware of. Otherwise, they will not use these technologies. And actually, we've seen people turning off their Alexas and Google Homes since all the news came out about third parties listening to them, not even people within the organization. Fairness, this gets talked about a lot, and it normally comes, people tend to talk about it around biased data. So I think Amazon was the latest, where they created an ML algorithm to recruit new people into the organization, and it was inherently racist and sexist because they trained it on historical data, and historical data showed that they predominantly hired white men. But they hadn't tested it. They put it out to public to use before they recognized that there was a problem. Explainability, so we're doing a lot of work with financial services, clearly doing things around automated mortgage applications and credit risk assessments is a really strong use case for AI. But what does that mean for vulnerable customers? If you're only looking to develop AI-powered products that suit a certain fraction of society, what does it mean for people who need wider support? And how can we explain and have an audit trail of how those decisions were made to combat that? And social responsibility, I mean, Tim touched on this loads. It's not just about the wider social impact. You know, what does it mean for the general public, for customers, for end users? But actually, it's about the environmental impact. When you think about the amount of computing power it takes to train image recognition to differentiate between a cat and a dog, it's insane amounts. I think it's the equivalent of 6 cars' carbon emissions. What's the point in knowing that a machine can differentiate between cats and dogs? So these are the questions we constantly ask, and we're constantly putting this at the heart of everything that we do. And there's 2 ways that we really can help organizations do this. The first is around ethical strategy. So if a company is just starting out on their AI journey and they want to ensure that this is at the heart of what they're doing, particularly kind of charities, NHS, there's a few organizations that we're working with in this area, then we will help them take the right steps on that journey and think about this at every step of the way. And then ethical assessment for companies that have already implemented AI and they recognize that it's potentially not meeting these values. Maybe we should try and do some work with Amazon. But there's a few things that we can do in order to assess bias. So one example is there's a charity in the Philippines where they developed a chatbot with one of the big 4 consulting, who remain nameless. And it was all about encouraging young women to get into work rather than getting married so young and having families. So the idea was it was career guidance. And the charity got in touch with us because they said, we think there's a problem and we're not sure what the cause is. But this chatbot keeps recommending that these young women become hairdressers. And we're just like, right, so what do you think the cause might be? And it was really interesting because they recognized that they weren't sure, but there were 2 possible triggers for this. One is that actually the data it was trained on. They think there might be inherent bias in the data that they had access to. And the other is that it was developed, designed, and implemented by an all-male team by this big 4 consulting company. So actually they wondered if there was unconscious bias that slipped in because they weren't testing it with users. They didn't involve a wider audience. So this is something we're really passionate about. We don't just talk about it. We are doing ethical AI. It's something that is at the heart of everything we do. So hopefully this has just given it one example of how we're doing this. And thank you very much.